Welcome. This is AllMinucOne Quick Shots. So, folks, you may have noticed if you follow me that I went kind of dark this past week, and that's because I had some travels going on through the weekend, and then the election came up, and I was maybe going to talk about the election some, and all of a sudden, it became a big, giant mess. Imagine that. A very contested election becoming a big mess with a Republican incumbent. Now, we saw something similar back in the early 2000s with Bush v. Gore. However, the difference was there was no incumbent. And with this, we also have COVID. And it's quite interesting because with that, they decided to change all the rules last minute. Well, the red states went very red, and the blue states went very blue, and all that was obvious. But the swing states seemed to be the issue. Now, instead of delving into conspiracies, voter fraud, or anything else that may be going on right now, I'm just going to give you my quick take on what I think will end up happening. And that is that this will play out in court. There are some agencies at the moment who are touting Joe Biden has won, but not all the votes are tabulated or in, nor are all the votes validated. There is rampant election fraud seemingly going on. We don't know how much of it is legitimate or illegitimate, but it does seem like it is going on. Of course, it goes on always. Every single time we have an election, there is voter fraud, but the thing is it's so seemingly innocuous. Not that it's rare, but it doesn't seem to factor in very much, at least in these big elections. The problem that we see now is how people are voting for the Senate and the Congress and also their state electorates, and then all of a sudden voting for Biden as well, or magically having several 100,000 votes appear out of nowhere in these areas that essentially have ballots that don't have any standard. So this is a problem. What does it mean? Well, it means that we just don't know right away. And again, I wanted to sit back before making any real comments, give it a few days, see what is going on. I don't think that jumping to conclusions is an intelligent way to analyze things. I think the best way to analyze things is to absorb as much information as possible. Now, today is Friday. Given that the election was Tuesday, we've had several days. And from what we can tell, there has been impropriety. There has been basically people validating the votes being kept from the counting process. There has been magical ballots in the middle of the night. There have been things showing up out of nowhere, which means that we really need to audit anything in contestant or being contested, that is, and we need to make sure that those are legitimate votes or not. This will take a while. Now, if none of this is settled by the 14th, which is when the electorates are supposed to set in their votes for the president, what will happen is it will go to the states, and the states will assign delegates, and likely Trump will win that way. None of this, whether he wins or loses, is good for our democracy. A lot of people have spoke about this, but of course, what you have to realize is that whether or before, let's say, before the potential fraud came in, whether fraud is there or not, what we're seeing is a very, very close election, which reveals something very important, and that is the division in America. Now, if you pay attention, you read a lot, you see what has been going on, you see the internet divide, you see all these different things out there being presented in the world, you understand that we are a divided nation. The right talks a lot about balkanization. The problem with that in the United States is it's essentially the city versus the countryside, and balkanizing is not going to make any sort of sense. We're not looking at regional issues as far as the state regions. Yes, the Northeast is very blue, and the Northwest, or the entire West Coast, is blue. But then after that, most of the United States is red except for a few areas. And largely those areas are overtaken by the city. Interestingly enough, that's also seemingly where a lot of the voter fraud has come from. Now, one of the bigger points I want to make in all of this is the idea that we are now looking at the institution versus the individual. This is something the American founding was very had a very important, meaningful point in that there weren't any institutions really in America. There was no aristocracy. The church didn't rule over the land. It was a government by the people, that is the individual. And there was the idea that the minority could essentially tyrannize the majority, as the aristocracy always has. However, there is also a rule of majority that can tyrannize the minority. So we try to balance that out. And the best way to balance that out is to hold up the individual over institutions. Unfortunately, the way American history has trended for the last 270 years has been the institutions are more powerful than the individual. And this has especially happened in the last 100 years. And with this, there has been a centralization of power within the federal government, the states and local governments becoming less and less important to the individual person, to the point where we have almost, but not quite, this imperial seat known as the presidency that is going to fix all things. Therefore, all problems, local, state, and federal, are the president's fault, regardless of the other houses of government and the other breakdowns within government. And what we'll find is let's say Joe Biden does somehow win this and does pull through with all of the shenanigans, what we'll find is another form of plutocracy implemented within our government, which, by the way, folks, is very much there. Now, plutocracy simply meaning people with the money, right? The aristocrats, those who have great wealth and influence. That, of course, could also be phrased as an oligarchy, because that is what we do live under. It is the natural way for things to go. People who have power wish to maintain their power, who have influence wish to maintain their influence, and people look up to them because of the position they're in. Now, there are some people who are despised because of the position they're in. Jeff Bezos, maybe, would be a person that comes to mind, or Bill Gates, who Bill Gates, by the way, was very much hated before he retired and became a philanthropist. Of course, it's kind of coming full circle back around to him with many of his ideas on vaccination and the like. The other thing that we'll get is a technocracy. Once again, we'll get these people who are experts. Now, if you do not pay attention, you may think the experts are always the best, but experts are quite often wrong. We can see this in the polling for this election, which made absolutely no sense. They were off by 7 points on average against Trump. That is, that 7 points on average went towards Trump. They were in the opposite direction. That is also the same within the House and the Senate. We've actually picked up seats as far as the Republican side. Now, I'm neither party, but when I say we, I mean, essentially, from what I see, the Republicans being a little bit more liberty-minded. I think many of the Republicans, however, are quite corrupt and like business as usual, or good buddies with the Democrats and the big government and the oligarchy, the plutocracy, and this technocracy. And we are going to get people in who are going to tell us, well, these are the rules that you have to make. These are the things that have to happen. These are to save the earth, to save the planet, to save America, to have a better economy. We had this very hardcore under the Obama years, and it did not work out well, to the point that Obama said, wave that magic wand to bring manufacturing back. It's never going to happen. And then Trump did such a thing. It's also, again, what the media does, all the establishment, the intelligence agencies, the FBI, all of that, they are the technocracy. Now, frankly, again, this comes back to institutions versus the individual. Those people have nothing to do with my life, and they may, to some degree, safeguard us from evil men. However, generally speaking, they have far too much power, and they're a vestige of the early era of progressivism in the United States that started off about 100 years ago. And that vestige led us into the point we're at now, where we are far less free than we've ever been, and now we are in a a coup, if you would, a very soft coup, but a coup nonetheless, a banana republic style election. And it's quite sad. And I'm not saying this because I want the Republicans to win. Now, of course, I did want Trump to win, but it doesn't matter. My life's going to go on. Now, my taxes are going to go up just like yours. And there'll probably be regulations that make me have to pay more taxes as well, just like you. And we will probably see more manufacturing leave the United States again, and trade deals reversed, and more globalism. And we're going to see a lot more lockdowns under a Harris Biden presidency. And it will be probably a Kamala Harris presidency within the first year or two. I don't think Biden's going to serve a full 4 years. I could be wrong. I just don't think it's going to be possible. And all of this, folks, just makes our society fearful. It makes us weak. It makes us fragile. And the reason why is because we're relying on the goodwill of these people who could care less about you. Look, Joe Biden has been majorly implicated in foreign deals and schemes. There are people on the left right now that I saw a few things talking about how, oh yeah, people now are talking about there's no evidence of election fraud, but people are talking about this. They just made this up when they decided to ignore all the rape allegations against Trump. Well, you guys decided to forget about rape allegations from Tara Reid against Joe Biden. You're ignoring the Hunter Biden scandals and the big business scandals where we have all the evidence in the world. The Russian collusion thing was pretty much made up, and you guys wanted to push that. But now you're going to expect people on the right to have a belief in the system. People who are right-leaning. Now, don't get me wrong. I haven't believed in the system for a very, very long time, which is why I'm an independent, and I don't like to work with inside the system. It's the same reason why I haven't voted for a president until this election for 3 elections. The system is highly broken, and the reason why is because we have this oligarchy. And in the end, what this does is it enslaves all of us. It keeps us in little boxes where we really don't have freedom. We have the pretend option of freedom. We have this pretend choice. You know, H.L. Mencken talked about this several years ago, many, many years ago, mainly during the progressive era or toward the end of it, where he talked about having this false choice. Many people have talked about this over the years who were liberty-minded people, as well as Lysander Spooner. And look, guys, again, all of this is going to be settled, hopefully, by the 14th, which means we got a long, long month ahead of us, month and a week or two, however quite long it is. And there will be a lot of disinformation as far as rioting and stuff like that goes. Well, that's going to keep happening regardless. The left is going to try to push Biden, regardless of who becomes the president. The good news is the Senate has maintained its seats, or at least enough to have a majority. And the House has flipped to some degree. Now, the majority isn't Republican, but it will help stave off crazy left-wing policies that may try to be implemented that is not good for the nation. And I would question, folks, if you think that these ideas or these things are good for the nation, why is that? Do you really think that someone in Washington, D.C., who has a very cushy life, is thinking about you and caring about you? I mean, we're talking about the same folks who wouldn't pass a stimulus. We've had one since this whole coronavirus thing. And I'm not a big fan of stimulus, folks, but look, the government came in and said you could not work, which is not constitutional, by the way. They have no right to do that. But they did it. And everyone listened. And people went to jail who didn't listen. And many things happened. Do you really think that these people who are elected care about you and your interests? Like, unless you really think that the coronavirus is the worst thing on earth and is just the most lethal thing, and therefore we have to shut down businesses and let people starve and let them be evicted and let them lose their homes, their mortgages, whatever else it is. If you think that's a better solution, being locked down and forgetting about all that. But I don't know what to say to someone who thinks that way. Like, you think those people in charge really care about you? You think giving them power is really a good idea? You know, I just want to be left alone, folks. I just want to go live out in the middle of nowhere. I just want to go fend for myself and take care of my family and my neighbors and those who might need my help personally. But that's about it, guys. Sorry I've been dark for a little bit. Really didn't mean to be out that long. Like I said, I was out of town for a couple days, and then with this election stuff, I thought, well, man, I'm going to keep an eye on this for a few days before I really get into it. But it's a mess, folks, if you don't know already. And I suggest that you stop looking at this ideologically and start looking at it legitimately and realize if the power structure is somehow reversed, your side may succumb to the same pitfalls and evils that are happening right now. So with all that, this has been All Minus One Quick Shots, and I wish you all well.